Ever wonder how a love for cake and cookies can revolutionize the ad tech world? Meet Simon Halstead, the strategist who decodes industry secrets with a latte in one hand and a slice of cake in the other. Today on the ADOTAT Show, we dive into Simon's uncanny foresight, his take on Google's cookie reversal, and why kindness and trust are his secret ingredients for success. Buckle up, it's going to be a sweet ride.
Deserve to win when it matters most. Facing multi-billion-dollar bet the company litigation? No problem. That's why we're here. Troutman Amin, LLP is a true legal powerhouse.
Folks, hold on for an ask. But today we got Simon Halstead all the way across the pond in the hot seat. He's not just your average strategist. This guy can navigate the Adtech jungle blindfolded and come out with the treasure map. We're talking about decoding industry secrets, shaking up digital strategies, and maybe even dropping a few truth bombs along the way. Buckle up for a wild ride through the world of ADOTAT and beyond. So Simon, before we plunge in the wild jungle of our industry banner, lay it on me. How is life treating you today? What is lighting up your day like a disco ball? And any saucy tidbits you're itching to share before we get into the meaty stuff?
So I'm at that lovely, nearly demob happy point of view. I'm about to take a vacation in under 48 hours. So I'm desperately trying to close out work and projects and get ready to head to the south of France for 2 weeks of hopefully not very much. You know the life of a entrepreneur and founder. You're never quite off. So just trying to minimize the workload down so I can really relax into the family time. And then outside of that, I've just been working on this. I'm still working on this super cool project about bringing, I can't say a lot about it because it's an under NDA, but about bringing a new sort of channel to market for programmatic and working through the earfuls on that. It's a real mind bender of a project, which is great to get involved in. It's making every bit of my little grey cells stop.
So, how about you share a lesser-known nugget about yourself that's usually overshadowed by your industry career, like finding a rare Pokemon in a sea of industry bigwigs?
So, one of my claims to fame is I met my wife at Buckingham Palace. That's not a standard dating point for people. We both worked in the summer opening for the Queen, who's dearly departed. Didn't get together there, separated, met again 8 years later. In an office and got together and have been married now for just under 20 years, 2 kids, all of the shebang. So all the fairy tale stories in palaces can come true.
So how do you keep a sunny outlook amidst the storm of all the global stuff going on right now, all the politics, in the UK, what happened in France, everything?
I mean, it's been a couple of weeks, right? It's I think we also
no matter where you are.
No matter where you are, changes in the US presidential election, changes in the industry with the cookie announcement, I'm sure we'll touch that at some point today. The French political situation, which is weirdly self-destructive, the ongoing conflict and challenge around the world. I think, first of all, I try to stay abreast of it, right? Like, I think informed is important, and then consider and think about it. I think then you have to remain hopeful. You have to remain hopeful that humanity will find a way to continue to drive forward. It's not always the case, but the general arc and trend is positive. And then hopefully we see more and more grown-ups come to the fore. Like, British politics is really interesting right now. I don't know how long it will last, but after the election there's been a slight descaling of some of the rhetoric between the camps. It's a little bit more grown-up. It feels a little bit like there are more grown-ups in charge actually trying to have some more conversations we need to have to improve all of our lots, right? Because, the UK as a country desperately needs to improve economic growth. And there are some hard choices to get there. And if you stop on point school, you get nowhere. So, I try and remain hopeful. I try and read. I listen to an awful lot of podcasts to take in information and be informed. And then when it all gets too much, I shut it all out and take my dog for a walk and go near some nature and feel a bit better that way, because that's the best cleanse you can ever find.
Tired of ads that make you want to gouge your eyes out? So are we. At Origin, we've remastered TV advertising to actually capture your attention and deliver real results. Ditch the same old, and elevate your brand with dynamic, captivating ad experiences. Expect better, expect Origin.
Sounds like it works. You've mentioned a fascination with foresight, but you also have an ongoing battle against the irresistible allure of cake. What is the scoop behind these personal quirks?
I think Like, you don't think of a superpower. I think the ability to not even see the future completely, but see some echoes of the future would be.
Right. Did you see the cookie thing? Did you see Google doing this?
So
and why didn't you tell me? Because I have recorded so many episodes. I have like 10 episodes of people talking about the cookie apocalypse, and they haven't been published yet.
The delay didn't surprise me when that happened. Like that, I'd seen coming a little while. The latest change, logically, it makes sense, but I was pretty shocked when it came out. I mean, if I had foresight, I would make better decisions around cake. I'd stop eating cake and I'd be several pounds lighter. But who can resist that? Delicious sponge and a cup of coffee. That's a pretty attractive part of anybody's day. Those are the two things where they balance. But I think just, again, it's not necessarily the ability to always know, but it's to help plan those paths ahead. And I think that's where I'm trying to help a business. And what I'm trying to do is trying to find them the way to navigate the paths that are ahead of them. And being more right more often would make my life easier and make me waste less work. Because I think one of my skills has always been to adapt to the path you find yourself on and then still look. Because we don't live linear lives, right? They're not straight lines. There's always sliding ball moments all the time. Every small and big decision we make is a change point. So foresight would just mainly help you avoid some of the worst ones you did.
So how do core values like trust, honesty, respect shape the DNA of your consultancy, especially in the piranha-infested waters of modern business?
So I think, first of all, you have to be true to yourself. Right. So otherwise you're inauthentic when you do work, when you talk to people. I think that exposes super quickly. Then you don't get repeat business. For a consultant, someone's moved into consultancy the last 18 months. My reputation is everything in that regard. That's why I get business. And so you have to be really careful. But to do that, you also have to live those values. You have to tell our clients something they don't want to hear, if that's the right answer. And remember that they're not paying you to make them feel good. They're paying you to give them advice and insight. And so I think having a good core, not over your context framework, really helps. And I think you can sell against that and you can deliver against that. And you can also then step away knowing, even if the outcome wasn't what everyone wanted, you've done the job in the way you said you would. And it's got the right answer there. It may just not be the answer people wanted.
So before we move on, is there anything that tickles your fancy today that you're dying to share or explore?
Yeah, do you know, one thing I'm sort of writing an article on it, which I was trying to get out for a bit on holiday. It might depends how the rest of today and tomorrow goes. There is big mental health pressure and stress for everyone in our industry right now, and we talked about firehouses in terms of current affairs and the industry. And I think people being okay with knowing it's okay to not know it all, to not be able to answer it all, is a really, really important point. I definitely feel I've come across a few people who, via either job situation with a lot of really talented people at work, or even in work but struggling with the nature of work, are finding it super tough right now. So I think genuinely keep having that conversation about people's mental health and genuinely not expecting everyone to know it all. Even you'd think as a consultant you should know it all, but you can't know it all. Like, my skill is knowing what I know and connecting with the people who know the things I don't to give the right answer. It's not trying to learn every industry. It's not trying to learn.
Well, I say one of the most powerful things is I don't know. If you can say I don't know to something, it means you're open to learning it.
And it also means you're open to listening to their experience.
Right. So your journey through the labyrinth industry roles, consultancy, conquest, has been nothing short of epic. What recent industry shakeups, besides obviously the cookie conundrum, caught your eye, and what's got you burning the midnight oil, pondering the future of our digital domain?
So I think there's a whole group of activity around MFA and sustainability, and actually the number of players, and consolidation is a theme. Like, I think we're in an industry that needs.
And you think they're connected?
There definitely are interconnections between the two. I think people have been trying to commit for as long as anything existed. Like, it's almost been the natural human response to an opportunity stall to try and handle the opportunity. I remember.
I mean, the biggest fraud is it was the Apple, supposedly, right?
Yeah, and then I remember one of the early
I'm referring to Adam and Eve, not the
Adam's original Apple, not the fruit-based company.
Right. Not Steve Jobs.
No, although, there's an interesting question about how you desert a position for your own ends in that versus is that really your underlying belief, the position, some of that effort, is their privacy plan genuinely a privacy concern for consumers, or is that push for some market control and share? I remember I was at a App Nexus conference in the mid 2010s, and their head of fraud at the time, before they did their first big cleanup of actors on the platform, actually said one of the best things I thought about fraud ever, which was, there are 4 of us trying to combat this fraud, and there are 50 people every time we knock one person down trying to recommit fraud and find another way. It is an endless, ongoing battle that exists. And so I think that there is a lot of control that buyers can put in. I think a lot of the A&A work was excellent about control G2, but it becomes a very individual decision that buyers should be making, and that tolerance really should sit to the buyer and maybe the buying platform. That said, I think obvious fraud, IVT fraud should be cut out. But I think MFA is a harder one. Sustainability is one of those things that I think is super important. Yet at the same time, I think there's a danger in our industry to become a buzzword and became a topic and a sales point, but it's a real commitment. And the trouble is we have a lot of competing dynamics. Publishers would probably maybe, in some cases, like to make better, more conscious, more rational choices for the planet. But guess what? They're struggling to pay
publishers really care?
Well, I think they would like to, but only if they were making enough return on their inventory to not have to have 10 people in the header, to not have to look at ways to recirculate inventory to get investors. And the line about whether that's acceptable or not are very, very grey. I think you could see that to a degree with the Yahoo and TradeDesk debate about the classification of inventory. Some of that is a perceptive thing about how you're classifying it. Certainly, I don't think either side was saying how to necessarily fraud, refuse the other, but one person takes a different position. I think. So I think all of those things are very challenging. I do worry that sometimes these things become the topic, the topic for sure, the thing we talk about, how much really committed action is delivered underneath to get them there, and how much self-interest gets involved in the way. That said, I think there's been some really positive work on the sustainability piece, and I do think that will continue to grow as important. I think sometimes these things also go into conference chatter, that we just like talking about the same things explicitly.
So you've mentioned before the industry has a blind faith in black boxes, kind of like betting on a mystery racehorse in the Adtech Derby. Can you debunk some common myths on this?
Yeah, we have this whole programmatic, right? It's actually really simple. I can think of some things I wrote back, and Esko Strong, who's at Samsung, and I used to debate in our days at Microsoft about the value of first or second price auctions. There was a view that programmatic was going to really democratize buying. It was going to help buyers find better audiences. Yeah, I think, and simplify some planning buying process. And actually, instead, I think just by default, people have lent into the algorithm making choices too much. Their focus becomes purely on the KPI versus that context and control of media environment, which doesn't exist really in other channels. And then, let's never get away from, we love to criticize black boxes in our industry, but the biggest source of display demand is Google Ads, right? Which is an entirely black.
And they're also the number one source of MFAs. People keep on forgetting that if Google went away, MFAs would probably be unable to survive. I mean, they survive on a lot of that the click fraud, or the clicks to the MFA site about, I think the big one is the cars. You see the picture of the car from 2050, you click on it, and of course it goes to another site. It then sends you to a third site that is some dealership that is not selling, obviously, that car from 2050.
Yeah, and it's it's a huge challenge, right? I mean, but I think that comes back to a real good maxim, I think, for the industry. Or the industry should be, just because we can, should we? And so when you think about, I used to be a buyer.
But isn't that the problem about corporations in general, with corporate responsibility?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a huge debate about if we start to make some of the words about what's the capability and limitation on AI is a really good example of that. And even the internal tumult at ChatGPT's parent, OpenAI, sorry, just went out my head. And there's also different needs in time, like coming back to that publisher perspective. Publisher may want to cut people from their head. If it's $1,000, that they need to risk being their business keep going for up to 2 months. But you can't always make.
It's not about how much money they're making; it's how much money they're making over their body.
Yeah, and it's also about you can't always make a conscious or sorry, conscious. People can't always make a rational choice or a ethical, empowered choice when they have other considerations that they have to find. And I think that's a real challenge for any publisher in our industry. And some of that, let's be clear, is publishers don't have a right to exist either, right? Like media consumption habits are changing. I was just talking with an industry colleague, and we were talking about the fact I still watch the news daily, probably twice a day if I'm really honest. I don't think my children have ever watched a news broadcast. And just to be clear, at 16, I'm going to sit down and watch the news. Like, it's not that it's just I'm an old man and they're young, and I am an old man. It's that the way news is consumed has fundamentally changed. I used to read the paper because it was around the house, so you get the paper in the house. My kids' news consumption is almost exclusively TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, probably as well. And my kids are good kids, well-rounded, have finding opinions, being exposed to a range of opinions. But when we've done so, that in some ways, actually, the desire to support good quality journalism is one of those things buyers love to say. They want to support good quality journalism. Yet their investment decisions don't always support that. And that's partly where you may see some of the algorithmic or black box must blaming about it, just leading away because, to create an in-depth investigation, who can afford to do it? One of the flagship news broadcasts in the UK, a program called Newsnight, it's DC production. It has a long history of campaigning journalism, actual decent length investigations. They should stop it. They've dropped that part of the format. It's gone to being much more of a news talk show now after many years. And that's because it was hard to fund, ultimately. I think about one of my favourite films, The Spotlight, and the work of the Boston Globe. And they had obviously it's back to the 70s or 80s, but they have a big team that's job is to write massive long investigations. It's hard to imagine those functions being funded anywhere in today's world. I mean, for me, that's certainly a detriment to the quality of information we face.
So, I want to talk a little bit about cookies. Do you think we're still going to move past the reliance on one-to-one cookies?
Sorry, they cut out a little bit. Let's actually say that again.
Sorry, do you think that we are going to still move past the reliance on one-to-one cookies?
Yes, I do. And I think the announcement this week is really a change in the mechanism of how we see cookie depreciation on Chrome. The slightly different question is, are we going to move past the concept of one-to-one targeting? The cookie will eventually become inefficient. If we look at some of the ADT adoption, let's wait and see what the experience is. But ultimately, the 60% of Chrome that's currently addressable is going to drop to 30% of Chrome that's addressable with a cookie. That's 15% probably of your total video. But that's not significant. So people are going to have a patchwork of solutions to get to their identity. Now, some of that will be authenticated. Obviously, that's in a sort of web-based environment. If you think about logged-in CTV environments, very different connection about that authentication of user. The question is, will we shift our buying expectation away from it? And so cookies, yes, will decline, or they'll be minimized to be part of a portfolio of how you create that identity. Will buying shift away to be more contextually driven or more alternatively driven? Yeah, that's hard. I mean, again, you come back to the 50% of demand is SME demand, right? That maybe will rely on contextual, or it may just go to simply a pricing mechanic to deliver its outcomes and remove all targeting. Retargeting becomes a challenge.
Do you think there'll be a demographic that keeps the cookies and that will kind of skew the whole targeting? Like maybe people who are less educated, less tech savvy, will keep the cookies, and then the people who are higher income, more educated will obviously opt out of the cookies. You think that might happen? Something like that?
I don't know. I mean, the European experience with cookie walls is horrific, right? If you've ever browsed in Europe,
right. Is there any studies on the demographics in the EU?
I don't. What I was going to say is I don't think I've seen it. I actually think the behaviour is fairly consistent. Actually, there's a reasonable amount of proving to clear and get rid of the cookie wall. The concern that there's a genuine consent. That's why one of the interesting things about Google is what is maybe the UX experience for this withdrawal? Will the decision be made once with the browser? In the almost going back to the original do not track, right? The original do not track concept, which actually showed distance in browsers, was a user made a decision with the browser about what was tracked. It will be interesting to see whether the Chrome output is, again, at the browser level, at the tab level, or if it comes down to the individual property and website. I don't think we've seen any detail on that yet. I think that's
interesting enough. It does show that there was a survey done in 2003 that shows that the older the consumer is, the more likely they are to opt out. So that might correlate a little bit with income loss, because obviously the older you get, obviously the higher.
Yeah,
and then if the 18 to 25 tends 32 opts out only 26%. Well, people over 55 opt out 41%. So it's a substantial difference.
Well, there is definitely some difference in that fear of surveillance, right? That fear of being tracked.
And I always thought it was younger, though. I thought younger people were more about privacy, but according to this, younger people are less about privacy.
There's a lot of stuff. I don't have the dates down in my front of the search as we speak in the back. There's another bit about, if you look at the TikTok and even Instagram generation and the generations before, they were much less concerned about they always expected to share data as
They just accept it?
They just accepted it, but then they're less concerned about the impacts of it. There's always been some debate about whether is that a naivety of the implications of sharing it at the point they're making that decision and giving that feedback. But actually, if you think about relative experience in relatively short term, right? My first job, so I was already working, you could still smoke in an office, you can't smoke in an office anymore. There was one term I had to get permission to use the PC with the browser on, even though I was trying to buy digital campaigns, I had to go and get permission for the one PC in the agency. Through to a world now where, let's say there's 2 or 3 generations now to make, probably 2 generations down to my kids' age. They've grown up in an entirely smartphone age. They've grown up actually my son really in a streaming TV world as well. But there's always been another option. There's none of that brand loyalty to TV. And so I think their expectations was that there is also something, but they're much less sharey also about the stuff they put out there. And I think that's like some of the arguments why things like TikTok, because it's not personalised in the same way. It's much more scroll dance silly versus this is my picture, and terrible research script that my own children refuse to protect us ever posting anything about that, which we don't do fundamentally because that's more they're like, you don't have the right to post my stuff. I'll post it if I want to, but you don't have the right. And so I think bizarrely they could be less concerned about being tracked but more cautious about what they share.
As a seasoned strategist, what core philosophies shape your client approach, and how do you ensure the insights slice through the BS of industry jargon?
Yeah, the simplicity is the first one. So first of all, simplicity of what you recommend to people, simplicity of how you talk to them. Make it so you frame things in their language. Really, we've all been terrible in Adtech about talking our language, about 3-letter acronyms or whatever. One of the first things I always do in any project is spend at least the first day or 2 or first week or 2 interviewing internally, understand the issues they feel they're facing, and they get to understand their language and the way their business presents those challenges so that you can help shape it in a way that will be adopted and listened to within a business. Versus if you're coming into an alien language on the outside and you get all these things they should do, you're not helping educate or grow that. So I think simplicity of approach, being very clear and agreeing well briefed up front what the outcome looks like, not what the outcome is, but what the format of their response, and then framing it in their language. And then also I'm saying either their concerns along the way or how to frame it into the paths they have available to them as well. I've just doing a project where someone has done a lot of research into the programmatic industry and brought a load of things in, and there's a really important piece about saying you don't need to go down those paths. There's a path of the last 10 years. Your approach into marketing is much more focused on the last 2 years. It's a much more controlled entrance to market. You don't need to worry about header bidding necessarily in the same way. It's really hard to explain to them going too much deep into the project, which I can't do. But understanding their context, I think, is critical. And then I think also trying to guess something is probably the other thing, actually. Just trying to listen to them at all points.
You think that's your superpower, listening?
I think listening and distilling. So being able to distill different bits of information into something that's digestible for them. That's where I feel like I bring real value. Being able to take them through the trend and bring them to the bits that matter to them.
Similarly, how do you separate fleeting fads from transformative shifts worthy of attention? And what did you tell your clients about the metaverse when it was every news article out there?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think if you focus on simplicity and focus on their business, sometimes there's a good conversation about, is this even relevant to your business, right? It's this, and the metaverse is a great example of, what does that transformation look like? Are we going to end up at the world where this conversation isn't the two of us, but it's avatars having the conversation? Me, for one, I hope not.
Right.
Personally, yeah. So if you're a market intelligence company, do you actually need to really worry about the metaverse? You need to worry about the information sources you're going to cover and be able to have access to. You need to be able to say why you're not. If you're a car brand, you absolutely need to look at what are the changes in consumption going to be. And that's where I wish I had better foresight, like we spoke about at the start, because that would make it a lot easier.
Basically, not every company needs to be on Roblox. A tax preparation
100%.
service does not need to be on.
No, and I had the joy of, in one of my iterations at AOL and Yahoo, we were owned by Verizon Media, and Verizon, lots of lovely people at Verizon. This is not a big Verizon. But guess what? Our corporate owner and sponsor was Verizon. And we pushed a lot of narrative about why 5G was the next big thing that mattered to media. And I don't see anyone having that conversation. And I don't think that's deliberate. So that's a self-interest that was being pushed because someone wanted to make the market in that space. Or even it spoke to the DNA that they understood as a business. We invested time in selling and trying to build a narrative in the industry that was relevant. I do think it's a weakness of our industry that actually it's easy to build narratives. That the year of the mobile. In-game is the next big thing. Mobile is hugely important. In-game is hugely important. It just doesn't need to dominate the whole conversation. And it needs to be selective about where you use it and how you actually lead into those channels. And the other thing I think, Roblox, an example is, how do you communicate to the audience on Roblox now? And do you want to communicate to the audience on Roblox now? And where are that audience going to be in 10 years' time? Right? And I'm a terrible...
Probably not on Roblox.
Probably not on Roblox, right? So actually, if you need to be talking to the 30-year-old about a mortgage, guess what? I don't think Roblox is really the place for it. Maybe more Minecraft, because people are building houses. Do I have a reason to be in that meeting? Do I have a reason to be present in that conversation? And then I think
Second Life is the perfect example of this mess.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure everyone will remember that reference, but I'm sure you and I do.
Look, I can remember buying GeoCities, right? Lycos GeoCities. Huge, and they were huge communities. And actually, there's a really interesting conversation about some of that loss of community that was originally in the original context of the internet. And where it was more discussive and open ideas, it's pretty tragic to much more siloed media commercial driven ventures.
Well, even before that, BBSs.
Yeah.
Dial up. You would dial into your local BBS. I was one of those people as a teenager and a pre-teenager. I was really active in BBSs. It was the way I could communicate with people all over the world. And mind you, it was at 2400 and the 9600.
I think that's the thing, is the cultural shift thing that comes with that is you never know, except with the benefit of hindsight, right? If I wish I had foresight, you only truly know with the benefit of hindsight what was a trend and what was a fad. I think it's just understanding the context and where the investment value is how you do that. There are obvious moments also though that come. I do think the climate change so sustainability is an issue. When you think about it, remember to always focus on consumers. If you're under 40, honestly, I think most people have a serious concern about climate change. Even in echo chambers they make it, they're just experiencing it, and it's a real meaningful. So that is